Thank you to everyone who supports this show and all the shows in the Major Spoilers Podcast Network. If you want to hear us riff on movies, The Suicide Squad, Free Guy, Green Knight, and why we don't tell you what we're doing, you need to go check out our pre-show, the Major Spoilers pre-show, that you can get when you become a patron over at patreon.com/majorspoilers. So why don't you go and do that right now?
The Major Spoilers Podcast covers news, reviews, and of course, spoilers, and goes into details about the topics discussed. So if you haven't read, listened, or watched the items we talk about, you might want to come back later.
I'm Matthew.
I'm Rodrigo.
And I'm Steven, and you're listening to the Major Spoilers Podcast, the podcast for pop culture and comic fans.
In this issue, we investigate the ivory towers of education, literally, with a look at the Black Mage, and Harry Potter will never read the same again. My Hero Academia is going live action. Avatar is trying again. The Bifrost is going to Asgard, and nobody knows what's going on with Venom. The internet, where we lay our scene from ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood make hands unclean, do with their podcast bury major spoilers. And lo, forsooth, 'tis on the air.
Welcome to issue 939 of the Major Spoilers Podcast. Thank you so much for downloading and checking us out this week. Ashley at her RWJ, and so she's not here this week, but that doesn't mean we can't entertain you. We've got a lot of stuff to go over, including the Black Mage later in the show. But first, how about we jump into some news? My Hero Academia is getting the live action treatment from Legendary Entertainment, and it has tapped director Shinsuke Sato to helm the project. Sato is responsible for hits like I Am Hero, Kingdom, and Alice in Borderland that you may have seen on Netflix. It's actually pretty disturbing and a pretty good series. This will be Sato's English language debut. My Hero Academia is based on the manga of the same name and follows the characters battling their way through high school in a world where 80% of the Earth's population manifests superpowers. And as popular as My Hero Academia is, I would bet if they can do the live action right, especially, I don't know if you guys have seen Alice in Borderland over on Netflix, but it's really solid, and I can't wait to see a season 2 on that. Matthew, you got some thoughts on the My Hero Academia live action television series, movie, whatever it is?
I do, and I think what it's really going to boil down to is the fact that your casting is going to be key here. Your casting is going to be killer because the characters, especially, guys like Grape Juice, aren't necessarily humans. So you're going to have to be really, really thoughtful about the casting of who you're going to get to play the main characters, how many of them are going to get in there. I mean, I remember going to see the first Harry Potter movie with a total Potterhead that I had a huge crush on. And she was so disappointed at how much had to be cut to make it into a live action film. And I'm kind of feeling like the same's going to happen here. But I also want to see what they do. And I want to see if they can, really make this work. How you're going to have to cast those kids really, really well. And also you're going to have to make sure that Best Jeanist is involved.
I think the biggest problem that they're going to face is they're going to have to really work the live action so that it doesn't just feel like we're doing a shot-for-shot remake of the animated series, which for a large part was just basically, let's use the manga as our storyboard and tell the story. There's going to have to be some changes going on. Otherwise, it's just going to be, oh, well, we've seen this all before. I was hoping for something a little different. That's my concern. So, Venom, Let There Be Carnage has been delayed again. Sony Pictures has announced that due to the pandemic, the next installment of the Tom Hardy Venom series will now open on October 15th, 2021, just about half of a month later than what it was originally scheduled to open. Andy Serkis is directing the film. The 2018 Venom was a quote-unquote surprise box office smash, generating $855 million at the global box office, unquote. The sequel stars Woody Harrelson, Michelle Williams, Reed Scott, Naomi Harris, and, of course, Tom Hardy. Now, we were talking about this a little bit in the pre-show, Rodrigo, about why this is delayed. COVID. Thank goodness by October, this is all going to be cleared up and people can just go about their business as normal on October 15th, everybody. Just mark that down in your calendars. COVID gone, October 15th. Sony Pictures said so.
By October 15th, we can all meet back at the Winchester for a pint and this will all blow over. I mean, good. It's good. It's good that they're pushing it back, because I think partially they're like, well, people aren't going to go to the theaters if there's a rampaging COVID outbreak. But I think more so they're like, I just don't want to pick up like the Miami Herald and says like 500 million cases of COVID tied to Venom 2 like
Yeah.
opening day, right?
Yeah,
Like
super
you don't
spreader
want
event.
that. You don't
Yeah.
want the virus trackers to, or the, what is it, like contact tracers to figure out that it was your movie that killed the entire population of Boca Raton.
Yeah, here's the issue that Sony is in. If you are releasing a Black Widow movie, well, you're Disney. You've got your own streaming service that you can charge $30 a pop to. If you're Warner Brothers and you want to release Dune, you've got HBO Max that you can release that thing to right away. Same way with Paramount Plus, same way with all the other streaming services. I'm not aware that Sony has a streaming service that is big name that people are aware of, that they could do even a simultaneous theater and streaming release at the same time. And so when it boils down to it, yes, it is a COVID issue and we all need to be aware of this stuff. But at the same time, Sony doesn't have any other option. They don't have a streaming service they can push it to where they get to keep, quote unquote, keep 100% of the revenue. Now I realize Disney Plus, they get the money, they paid Disney for it, blah, 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 blah. But it's all the same. It's all the same bank account. And the same way with HBO and Warner Brothers. Sony doesn't have that. So I think Sony's kind of forced into a situation where if we don't want one of these situations where people call Venom 2 Electric Boogaloo a flop because it didn't make some imaginary estimate in the box office opening weekend, they have to push it. They have to push it because they've got nothing else to do. Now, would I just wait a month and hope everything gets cleared up? Oh my God, no.
Not.
I mean, this is something that, hey, why don't we just push this to May of 2022 and hope for the best? And if you have to push it until May of 2023, push it to May 2023. That movie is going to just sit there on the shelf. They did this with, remember, what was it, The Cabin in the Woods? That movie, the Joss Whedon movie. It sat on the shelf. It sat on the shelf for like 2 years until Chris Hemsworth became a thing with Thor. And then suddenly they're like, ooh, we better put this out so that we can make money on it. That movie's going to make money whether it sits on the Venom is going to make money whether it sits on the shelf for 1 month or 2 years. It'll be fine. Now, of course, that affects bottom lines if you have to come to the end of the year and say, Sony, you said you were going to release a movie this year, and how much did you spend on that, and where's the money coming in from that? That's where they start to feel the pressure. But honestly, set it on a shelf. It'll come out when it's ready to come out.
Yeah. Age it like cheese.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, providing that, none of the actors pass away before your film release.
Age it like beef.
Yeah.
Then, of course, you've got another reason to draw more people in.
Yeah, as morbid as it is, that would actually help.
Look at Batman.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, let's see. The cast of the live-action Avatar: The Last Airbender series on Netflix has been revealed. Here we go. Gordon Cormier, Kia Wentio, Ian Owsley, and Dallas Liu have all joined the series. Cormier stars as Aang, and Kia Wentio set to play Katara. Owsley will play Sokka, and Liu will play Zuko. Original series creators Michael Dante DiMartino and Brian Konietzko were originally attached to create the series for Netflix, but they announced in August 2020 that they were no longer involved. They have since announced a new deal with Nickelodeon to establish Avatar Studios, which will create new animated series and films set within the Avatar universe.
I'm good with this. I took a look at the pictures of all of these young actors and actresses. I'm fine. Not that I really have a say because it's all the studio's decision who they cast in this. I don't know. I'm sure the internet is erupting in heated fervor saying, oh, this one's not bald enough, or this one doesn't have the angst that I want in this character.
This kid doesn't even have facial scars.
What is interesting is that reportedly the creators of the original, DiMartino and Konietzko, left the Netflix project because they had stipulations about the cast. They had stipulations that said that they wanted to cast people of color. I don't know if the boy who's playing Aang is like what his ethnicity is, but I'm pretty sure everybody else is a person of color. And
Yeah,
he
I
might
think
be
they
too.
I think they all are. I'm
Yeah.
not gonna say. I mean,
So-
just by looking, I could say, oh, this person probably has this ancestry in them. But
So my guess is what happened was they said we'd like to cast people of color for these characters. The streaming service said no, thank you. You guys can leave. They left, and then everybody jumped down Netflix's throat and was like, "What do you mean you let them go?" And over this, what the heck, man? So they ended up doing it anyway, and now I would not be surprised if these like Avatar studio stuff ends up on Netflix anyway, although
oh, I'm sure it is.
unless they're like somehow connected to Paramount Plus,
Yeah,
which
Yeah.
I don't think they are.
I mean, it's
Gordon
Nickelodeon,
Codier
so
is
that's
Filipino Canadian. So
Nickelodeon is Paramount. So yeah,
Oh,
Paramount
okay.
Plus type
So
stuff.
that's probably heading to Paramount Plus then.
Yeah.
well,
Matthew-
you know what I say.
What
With
you
this
say?
what do
Avatar
you say?
Studios universe. You know what we need? The Legend of Varric and also Julie.
I
We
mean,
just need a whole Varric series.
that would be good. I would argue that a couple seasons of Korra started to feel like the Legend of Varric.
The Varric show. I love the
Yeah.
Varric show.
Yeah, it's all good. He's a good character.
You know what you could call it?
What?
Varric does the thing.
Yep.
And then every week he can do a different thing. You know, like Captain Kangaroo used to travel around the universe and put out forest fires and, fight Cybermen and stuff.
Definitely a variety show would be best, I think, for a Varric based show.
Yeah, like what was it, Pink Lady and
Pink Lady and Jeff.
Jeff. Yes, that's
The
what
Brady
it can be.
Bunch variety hour.
Yeah, Pink Lady and Jeff. There you go, Matthew. Go
Yeah,
pitch
I love
that.
it.
Why don't you wrap up our news segment for us?
I will. Autobots transform to Queen's Rook 5. Eagle Moss has announced a new chess set based on the original Transformers animated series for $600. Fans can lead Decepticons or Autobots as they battle for the fate of the world on, 64 squares of grid. I don't know. I don't really know how chess works. I think a knight goes in an L and then a bishop goes sideways. Anyway, the Kickstarter campaign is running till the end of September. They're looking to raise $300,000. Currently, they're sitting at about, if my math is right, 20% of that at $60,000.
That's only like 100 complete sets.
I know, but
right?
even so.
Yeah, so it's a little pricey, but it got me thinking. You remember what was it, the Franklin Mint or whatever used to have the Civil War chess set, where every month you got like one or two figures to where
$19.95 a month.
Yeah, so take that times what, 20, 40 characters or whatever it is. So I'm sure it's the kind of the same thought process. I'm just curious if there are enough. I mean, we see campaigns. Speaking of Avatar, the Avatar RPG blew through its goal on the first day. We're now 3 or 4 days into this Eagle Moss thing, and they haven't even gotten close to that. So maybe they have something coming up on the back end. I know people like novelty things, but I just wonder what's going on here. I'm not saying it's a horrible idea, but I could think of other things that I could spend my $600 on.
There are a lot of Transformers fans in the world, and there are a lot of hardcore Transformers fans who would be willing to drop $6 large on a chess set. The question is really going to become, are there enough who are going to know about this and get involved in this? Because,
well, there you go. Major Spoilers doing a service to help promote Eagle Moss, who we will never see a dime from in this news segment / advertisement.
Just get me a King of Optimus Prime. And
yeah, so I don't know if you've looked at all of the set pieces. So here's the set pieces. For the Autobots, Optimus Prime is the king, Alita 1 is the queen, Ultra Magnus Bishop, Grimlock Bishop, Hot Rod Knight, Springer Knight, Ironhide Rook, Ratchet Rook, RC, Blue Streak, Bumblebee, Jazz, Prowl, Sideswipe, Sunstreaker, and Wheeljack are all the pawns. Wow. On the Decepticon side, we have Megatron King, Starscream Queen, Skywarp Bishop, Thundercracker Bishop. Knights are Shockwave and Soundwave. The Rooks are Astrotrain and Blitzwing. And then we have Brawl, Frenzy, Laserbeak, Ravage, Rumble, Scrapper, Shrapnel, and Thrust are your pawns.
Wait, Brawl?
Yeah.
Brawl.
That's what it says.
Okay.
That is what it says.
The thing about Brawl is part of a team of 5. He's one of the combiners that turned into Bruticus. So having Brawl without his other dudes just
Yeah, that's another thing. Is like it would make sense for the pawns to be the Constructicons or whatever.
right. Well, and I mean, you have 8 pawns on the board. There are only 5 Constructicons.
That's true.
But even so, I'm down with everything, pretty much everything, but the Rooks on the Decepticon side and Brawl. But yeah, I mean, if honestly, this is the thing. If I didn't still consider $600 to be car money, I would totally go all in on this because I think it would be great. But I don't play chess.
Yeah,
so
man,
it would literally be another collectible that sits in my house, and I'm just like,
well, I'm very curious to know of the people who bought the Civil War chess set, or the Star Trek chess set, or the Star Wars chess set, or the DC chess set. For those of you that have bought those and listening, can you tell me how often can you write to us, podcast@majorspoilers.com, and let us know how often you pull that Civil War chess set off the mantelpiece and play it with, or your Star Wars, your Star Trek, or whatever one, because they all had their own chess sets. Drop us an email at podcast@majorspoilers.com, or you can join the conversation about these stories and more over on our Discord server. You can join the Discord server for free. There is a link in the show notes. I'm not going to read you out the address because you'll never remember it by the time you rush to your computer. Just open up your show notes for this episode. It's right there. Just click on it. It'll open up Discord. You can get in there for free and have fun with everybody and talk about this show or a lot of the other things that are going on in the comic book, television, movies, sports ball, art. I forget what else. There's a whole bunch of other stuff. And RPGs, right? Yeah. There's also secret channels. Now, you may be asking yourself, wait a minute, did you say a secret channel, a secret Discord channel? How, Stephen, do I get access to this? Well, dear listener, here's how you do it. You become a patron over at patreon.com/majorspoilers. I believe it is the silver level membership and higher. You get access. You can connect your Patreon account to your Discord account. And when you go into the Major Spoilers Discord, there will be bonus channels where you can talk about Critical Hit a week early. You can go in and partake in the VIP live chats each month. You can go in and listen to the Dueling Review podcast live that we record Thursday nights at 8:00 p.m. You can also be part of the GM Roundtable and a whole lot more. That's the perks of being a patron. So go to patreon.com/majorspoilers and sign up today. We're going to jump into some reviews real quick. I probably have the most disturbing comic that you will read this week. It is Eat the Rich #1 from Boom Studios. Sarah Gailey and Pius Bach are the creators on this. This is a girl who is obviously not filthy rich, who's coming home for the summer, ? I think it's the summer. She's coming home with her boyfriend, Astor, to Crestfall Bluffs, where she's going to meet the family and hang out with the rich people for the entire summer. And of course, she's going through all of these extremes of, how are they going to think about me? What are they going to think about me? How do I act? And then of course she gets there and the filthy rich have people working for them nonstop. And, she tries to, talk to some of the help or interact with them. And she's brusquely told, you do not talk with the help. And, but the one thing is, these families really, really do love and appreciate their servants. In fact, when it comes time for them to move on, when it comes time for them to retire, they hold a huge gala for the retiring people, whether that be the old gardener in the case of this issue, or whether it be a babysitter that is done doing her service for the child rearing part. They have a big banquet. And that's where things get really, really dark and disturbing. Can't say I didn't see it coming. There's a lot of visual cues leading up to the big reveal of what is going on here. I'm not a fan of this kind of story and this kind of stuff that is going on, but I'm hoping that the title Eat the Rich kind of comes back upon these people, the rich people of this community. I will be very interested to see if that happens. There's nothing, there's nothing in this comic that you haven't seen in a million other comic books. Well, maybe a million's a little exaggerated, but maybe not.
7 other comic books.
Well, I could think of 7 other comic books off the top of my head. All of them have zombies in it. But I think that you probably ought to be prepared for, a little bit of a twist that you probably see coming if you've read the first 4 or 5 pages of the book. But just to give you a heads up, it gets kind of interesting at the end. Not particularly my cup of tea. It's solidly written. The art is fine. I just am not a fan of this type of horror story. And so I'm going to give this one 3 slices of meatloaf out of 5. For those of you that have read the book, you're probably going, oh, Stephen, that's a little bit too much, calling them meatloaf slices. But yes, it's the mystery meat in the meatloaf that you have to be worried about. I probably could go 3.5 slices. I mean, it's not bad. It's just not my cup of tea. And I think for many people who are into that kind of horror, you'll probably eat this right up. So go check it out. It's from Boom Studios this week. Eat the Rich, #1. Matthew, what do you got for us this week?
I got me one of them there comic books, Radiant Black, #7, out today, written by Kyle Higgins, art by Marcello Costa. So I realized something as I was reading a previous issue of Radiant Black, I think with you. Kyle Higgins is the guy who launched the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers franchise at Boom.
Yeah, he did.
A few years ago.
Yeah, many years ago.
And I'm like, I didn't realize that.
Ryan Parrott does it all now, I think.
Yeah, Parrott and I think there's another dude, Cena Grace, if I'm not mistaken. But here's the deal about Radiant Black. Radiant Black, the first 4 issues, seemed to go somewhere and then didn't. Radiant Black #5 made a huge swerve that Stephen and I both were kind of shocked and entertained by. And then Radiant Black #6 made a very bold choice to jump out of sequence entirely and go back and tell us what happened with the villain of the first 2 issues and understanding how that villain got to where they are today. So Radiant Black #7 actually picks up from the last page of Radiant Black #5. Now, if you read Radiant Black #5, you know that, okay, spoilers coming here, so plug your ears and sing the Star Spangled Banner. It ended with the reveal of a pink Radiant and a yellow Radiant. And now all 4 of the Radiants, red, black, pink, and yellow, are being chased by a weird, evil, glow-in-the-dark ninja who has powers that rival their own. Interestingly, though all these characters have similar powers, they use them differently. And when working together, one of them can do things and the others can't necessarily do it, but they can all share the power if one of them is doing it. And I really appreciate that sort of lean to it. Here's the real steel deal, okay? My name is Matthew, and I am a particular breed of nerd. I like a metatextual story, and I like it when the story does goofy things like casting Linda Carter and going nudge, nudge, wink, wink, or having, Supergirl's mother be played by the actress who played Supergirl in 1984. All of that stuff is wonderful for me. So at the point that Radiant Black #7 dropped a whole slice of meatloaf for me, you have to understand exactly how weird and how above, just beyond the pale this is. Doing really well. Characters are fighting. Teleport to Tokyo. They have their fight. They all run away. And 2 guys standing on the street corner look at each other. And one of them says, "Which Sentai is that?" That right there. And it shouldn't, but it really did just grate right up against my spine. And it hurt me in a way that I can't understand.
It's too on the nose.
It really is. And, it's an anomaly because this is a very solid issue. Because
come on. I think that's a joke that people have been waiting for 7 issues. So at some point you've got to drop the joke and say, yes, we know what you're all thinking.
I believe that anvils need to be dropped, and I believe that dead horses need to be beaten. And for me, the rule of 3 is just the beginning. I am perfectly willing to drag a joke screaming through the mud, but for some reason that one threw me. in an issue that's, mostly actually pretty good. It's not as solid as previous issues because the introduction of yellow and pink happened 2 issues ago, and most of this issue takes place without any real explication. So we're not getting more information. We're just kind of getting fights. And, I'm fine with that. Comic books, they need some action. But I feel like by the end of this issue, one of the major conflicts is still right there and still kind of, grating against the characters. Radiant Black and Radiant Red are not happy. And I really feel like the ending sort of comes out of nowhere. There's a sensation when you're reading a comic where you're like, oh, yeah, I've probably got another 5 pages of this stuff. And then it's like, boom, we're done. So, no, I would call that maybe a pacing issue. That said, I really love the art in this book. I really like the underlying premise. And I feel like, much as I hate to say it, it's going to read great in a trade. So, Radiant Black number 7, 3 Slices of Meatloaf. It's a solid comic. It's a good comic, and I can almost forgive them for the Super Sentai joke, and then I'm just going to sigh and, move on.
All right, there we go. Rodrigo, you are wrapping up our reviews this week with a look at Norse Mythology 2, number 3 is what I'm guessing. That's the one that is out this week.
That's a total of 5
Dark Horse Comics.
Yeah, Norse Mythology, Volume 2, number 3. Of 6, I believe. Written by Neil Gaiman and P. Craig Russell. So this is a comic book adaptation of Neil Gaiman's Norse Mythology book or series or something. So again, always, as always with this series, like, be aware that this is being filtered through Neil Gaiman, right? This isn't necessarily a historiographically correct, like, what is the core of these tales. These are tales being retold by somebody. So in this story, this one's actually about Thor and Loki, which I think a lot of people, when they started reading Norse mythology, were like, where are Thor and Loki? This one actually features Thor and Loki, as opposed to their siblings, half siblings, parents, and people that are made out of spit. So in this story, we have Thor and Loki and this other character who is, part of the story. But it's funny because he's younger and he kind of has a superpower, but not to the degree that they do. So it feels very much like kind of a Mary Sue character, or just like, or like a kid sidekick character that's like thrown in there to be a stand-in for the audience. That way, like, Thor and Loki have to explain things, and it's true. It happens. Loki gets him to do something, and it turns out to be bad. And Thor runs into problems because of it. So, it's actually a pretty fun dynamic. Probably my favorite part of this is they meet a giant. The giant helps them by holding something for them. Then they need it back, but the giant's asleep. So Thor tries to wake him up and he can't. So he hits him as hard as he can with Mjolnir. And the giant briefly wakes up and is like, "Oh, I'm sorry, guys. I think a little tiny leaf fell on me, or the tiniest acorn, maybe. Anyway, I'm gonna go back to sleep." Right? You don't see that a lot in definitely modern and other retellings of Thor. Like, here's a character who is just like Mjolnir doesn't even factor into their cognizance. The story takes us all the way to Jotunheim, which is where the giants hang out. So we'll see where it goes from here. Probably they're gonna get into some more trouble. It's fun, the way that it's told. It is told in that sort of folktale style, which I really like. And if any of you have read my book, I like so much that I basically wrote a book in that style.
Yep.
So I really appreciate it. I appreciate like it's when you're doing folk tales, it's like almost better that things aren't really explained, or that things are just like, yep, and then this character who was this character's child showed up, and it's like, do we know who that father character is? No, but somebody does, somebody somewhere does, and that's important. It's important that this character is related to this other character, even though it's not relevant for this story, right? All of those things, all of these trappings, all of these things that feel like are part of that oral tradition are very good and very satisfying. I'll give it 4 slices of meatloaf. It's fun times. Really, the only issue that these tend to have is that they're kind of cut in weird ways. The stories don't always seem to fit very well in the like what 24-page comic format.
Yeah.
Like it feels like there needs to be sometimes more, sometimes less. That's really the only issue with them.
I can see that. All right. So that is out next week, the 25th, from Dark Horse Comics. So be on the lookout for that, boys and girls. Get your Norse mythology fix. I rather enjoyed Gaiman's book that he wrote that tells these stories, which I'm guessing these are just the adaptations of that. So,
I think so, yeah.
Definitely worth go checking out if you get the chance and if you are so inclined. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen, we have a link in the show notes where you can purchase all of the issues that we have talked about via the Comixology digital comic book service. Now, these are affiliate links. So if you do decide that you want to go and buy Norse mythology, or you want to check out Radiant Black or Eat the Rich, you can click on that link that is in the show notes. That'll take you over to Comixology. You make your purchase. A little bit, and I mean a very little bit, comes back our way. But if that means that we can buy a few more pellets to feed the hamster so that we can keep the lights going for, a few more hours, it is
Rob
greatly
has a name.
Appreciated. No, he doesn't have a name. If Bob wants to have a name, he can learn to run a little faster so that we don't have to worry about, do we have enough electricity to have Ashley on the show this week? So, Bob, if that is your name, get busy. And dear listeners, if you want to make sure that Bob gets fed and doesn't starve to death, then you definitely should buy some comics through that Comixology link, or
buy some
even better,
or we kill this hamster.
Even better, become a patron over at patreon.com/major spoilers. All right. It's back to school time, ladies and gentlemen. My kids are going back to school starting today if you're listening on Wednesday, or last month if you're listening a month from now. Hello, future people. So this month this week we're taking a look at The Black Mage Volume 1 from Daniel Barnes and DJ Kirkland. This has been released from Oni Press, and this is a book that is aimed at young audiences. And so I think that once you understand that this is a YA book, a lot of, I think, some of the things that they do make a lot more sense, that you kind of have to hit people over the head with some of the messaging, which I think is fine. But this is a story about a boy, Tom Token, who is black, who is a magician, a mage, and he is invited to the St. Ivory Academy, a big white tower floating above everything that is a historically white wizarding school. And he is there because, integration. And he goes there and discovers something else that's going on. Also, hey, we get the ghosts of Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass, just call him Fred, and John Henry also make appearances in this book as well. It is done in a very manga-esque style. There's a lot of references to the magical schoolgirl type stuff in this piece. And I'm curious, Rodrigo, what you thought of The Black Mage.
So when I was first going through it, I had, I think, a similar reaction to what you mentioned, Stephen, which is that I was like, a lot of this stuff is really on the nose, right?
Yeah. Like Tom Token's got a familiar. It's a black crow, and he calls him Jim.
Yeah, named Jim. Yeah. That one actually does bug me, because it's like it's not something like, for example, the headmaster of the school's last name is Lynch, right?
Oh,
okay.
God,
Yeah. So, but I'm like, why would a friend of the main character be named Jim Crow? That doesn't make sense.
Right.
But anyway, aside from that, yes. I mean, this comic is really on the nose with its imagery. And at first, I was like, well, where's the fun in that? But then I realized that, people watch and read material that is clearly meant to be allegorical
Mm-hmm.
for race relations, for same-sex marriage, for all this other stuff, and they just don't get it, right? It
Right.
just flies completely over them. They don't see the metaphor, no matter how elegantly the author points at it. So I'm like, you know what? I think this is good. What I really like about it is that by really just having regular old racism be part of this universe, it kind of grounds it, but also um, it's not like it also doesn't give you an out, right? We read a comic a long time ago where only black people were superheroes, or only black people had superpowers.
Yeah.
I don't remember what the book was called, but in that book, it turns out kind of that like that anti-black racism comes from like a specific person and an organization that are doing it for a specific reason. And to me, that really deflated it, because the original origins of racism, the real history of racism, is bad enough. You don't need to give it to a supervillain.
Mm-hmm.
Because the idea that you can fix it by just punching someone in the face hard enough is weird, right? And I'm not saying that's necessarily where that comic was going. That was just set up in the first volume that we read.
Yeah, that was
this
Black.
One,
Black is the comic you're thinking of.
Yeah. So in this one, racism is just racism. You can't fix it except by like the work that you do, by like the privilege that you have, and putting it towards that, right? Which is the only way to really fix racism in any given organization or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciated that aspect of it.
Yeah, at first I was kind of taken aback by, wow, you really are hitting people over the head with this messaging where, all of the wizards, including the headmaster, who's the grand wizard, get it? They're all wearing KKK outfits,
Right.
And, the Jim Crow as the Crow and these kind of things. I was like, wow, this is really in your face. But then I'm realizing, yeah, like you said, Rodrigo, younger audiences probably don't get this. In fact, I was doing a rewatch of Lovecraft Country the other day. Misha Green's great HBO series adaptation of the Matt's I forget his last name, Matt Stone, maybe it's Matt Stone, book. And in the very first episode, they go into a diner and the three black characters have to run because the people in the town come after them with guns and are chasing them down the street and shoot them at him. And the person I was watching it with was like, why are they shooting at them? And I was like, welcome to racism in the 1950s. Right. Some of this stuff is still around today, and had to explain some of the horrible history of our own city in which we're living. And they were like, oh, I did not realize this stuff. So I think that in some cases, especially for younger readers who I'll ask Matthew and Rodrigo this in a moment. I'm not sure who the target audience is, because if your target audience are people of color, I think they get that stuff, right? So I don't know if this is targeted towards a lighter complected audience who may just go around the world going, oh, everything's fine with the world. There's no racism. Racism doesn't exist. And that they need to be hit over the head with this. So I'm curious, Rodrigo, who do you think the target audience is? Now, the creators of this series are both people of color. Right. So that's where they're coming from on this.
Yeah, I think I would imagine that the intended audience is young black people, with like just a bonus if young white people also latch onto it. Because
and I guess the good thing is because Tom Token wins in the end and defeats mean old Whitey.
Yeah, but it's more than that. I think that what this comic is actually doing is kind of like fortifying the experience of marginalized people. It's saying people do try to gaslight you. Like people do racist things and then turn around and they have an excuse for it. Or people make decisions based on race and then they turn around and they find reasons for that later, and it is and the fact that you feel like you're being discriminated is correct. You are being discriminated. This is real, no matter how much people try to deny that it is.
Yeah. I can see that. And so I kind of like that it was done in this cartoony style to attract readers, and then has a message that does have to hit hard over your head, ham-fisted, some people might say, to drive the points home. And so from that aspect, I thought that the volume for me succeeded. Now, Matthew, I don't know what you thought of the Black Mage.
I was profoundly uncomfortable, and I actually had an experience that I'll have every once in a while when I'm reading something, and I'm like, okay, before I go any further, I need to look up the author, and I need to find out whether this is, for lack of a better word, whether this is okay. Because if I went and I came into this book thinking that it was written by people of color as an explanation, or, as a part of an experience that they had been through, I'm fine with it. But if this was not, if this was somebody trying to impart these bits and pieces, the joke about, Lynch and the ghost of Harriet Tubman, and the moment where I realize, yes, that character is in fact named Jim Crow, I feel like it would have been an entirely different matter. And I feel like the difference is really one of, I think, reading it and knowing who the creators are makes it feel like not just, a parody, but also something that's trying to educate me. And so when I felt profoundly uncomfortable, that's by design. And that's actually good, because I really went into this feeling like, I don't need another Harry Potter story. I don't need another Chosen One. I don't need what the solicitation made me think I was getting. But then I got what I actually got out of it, and I went, I didn't realize that I needed that, but I guess I kind of did, and I really appreciated that. But I also read it recently. I found a really great show on HBO Max, and this is totally related. It's called A Black Lady Sketch Show, where the entire creative team, the entire cast, the entire writing room is women of color. Mm-hmm. And I watched the show, and there are, bits and pieces, and there's these really neat things where I feel like I'm almost getting a glimpse into a completely different culture that's fascinating. And then I sit and I laugh, and then, a character just casually N-words. And I'm like, am I allowed to laugh at this anymore? And that is an important experience for me as, your general old white guy to have. Because a lot of times I feel like people go in and, don't realize who is uncomfortable reading your stories. And you can read these stories, or you can read, just a general comic book. You can look at, the Avengers movie, the one woman, one man of color, and then everybody else is a bunch of, general European guys. And you can say, how many people went into that movie and felt uncomfortable watching that movie just based on, the context or the subtext, whatever you want to call it, of what's going on here. So I feel like, on the one hand, I'm probably not going to read this story again, but I'm also glad that I did. And I feel like if, we do come up with a sequel, or if we come up with something,
I think there is a second volume.
See, I'd be willing to read that. But I also, will go into it with the same kind of cautious, hey, where am I coming into this? How am I supposed to take away from this? Because first of all, I like when I have to think. I like when something in my stories makes me consider, wait a minute, what the hell have I been doing? Or what the hell have these other stories been doing? Or, in this case where I was looking at it and I was like, man, some of the stuff in Harry Potter is just never going to read the same for me.
Well, no, especially after you find out what the author's all about. I'm sorry, this is book one. This is book 1 of 1, so there's no sequel to this. I'm curious, Matthew, why you would never read this again?
Because I feel like, first of all, as you guys noticed, it is primarily aimed at younger readers, and I feel like while I appreciate what it is saying, and I have no problem with what it was saying. I don't feel like it's a book that I'm going to keep coming back to and coming back to and coming back to, partly because of the fact that it is aimed at much younger readers than me, and partly because once you've gotten through this and once you've had, that particular anvil dropped, you don't want to follow it up with the same thing. You need to go and investigate deeper. You need to go and look at something, I think with more depth and more real world expectations, if that makes sense, rather than, a story like this that is literally designed to make you go, oh my God, I never even thought about that. When it comes to your young adult fiction or
but isn't that what you want in this book though, is to make people say, I never thought about that. And now you're saying you don't want to read it again. Is it because it doesn't make you comfortable? Is that what it is? I guess I'm still not wholly clear on why you're not interested in reading this again, besides that it's outside your age demographic.
I feel like if I were going to go back, I would not read this again. I would go in depth into something else. I would try and find that next step down or step up, depending on how, you're defining it. That next story that would be able to explore these same sort of things. I'm not going to have that same experience reading this a second time, where I get to the end of chapter 1 and I'm like, oh, I'm profoundly uncomfortable. That's not going to happen again. So what else can I read that has that same effect?
Oh yeah, there's plenty. The nice thing is that as publishers are starting to realize that they have an audience outside of 35 to 65-year-old white men, we do have a lot more, like Rodrigo mentioned Black earlier. We do have a lot more stuff that gives that perspective. Now, Matt Ruff, who did do Lovecraft Country, he is a white person. But Misha Green, who did the adaptation for HBO, she did a fantastic job of that. But yeah, there is a lot of other stuff that will explore these issues. I think that there is some repeat readability in here, at least from my standpoint, because as you read through it, you're like, well, that seems heavy-handed, and that seems this, and this seems this. I think even as a second read-through or a third read-through or however many times you might want to read this in the future, it might be a great place to just kind of reground yourself. Did I stray too far? Did I suddenly realize that I'm starting to do all the things that I didn't think I was doing again? Or reading this and going, oh, I hadn't. Now I'm looking at this, knowing what's happening next. I can be a little bit more critical in this section to see if there's any other meaning that can be gathered from this comic. So I think that there's some readability in here. I think this is definitely young. I like the target audience in the young readers. And now it says young adult, or it's YA. So young adult is what, 10 to 14. And I think that's probably a good age, although you could probably give it to an 8-year-old and they wouldn't have a problem with this either. But yeah, I rather enjoyed this. And I think that there is a lot of rereadability to this. I know a lot of people reread the Harry Potter books again and again and again, because it's like, oh, I just like the story and I want to go and explore these different themes that I didn't pick up on the first time. So I may disagree with you there, Matthew. I think that for me, I think there's some rereadability in here, some other enjoyment that can be done, especially on the art side, Rodrigo. I'm curious what you thought about the heavily manga influenced art in this.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It's interesting. There are a lot of mostly there are a lot of sort of verbal references, like pop culture references, mainly to like video games. But I think at some point somebody pulls out like Sailor Moon's wand or something.
Yes.
So it was interesting to kind of see these characters and then see like visual references as well. Not to mention that the artist does a pretty good job of communicating Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass, who are, real people.
Yeah.
As, sort of a more stylized cartoon versions of themselves. So
I want another volume of this just so I can see the further adventures of Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass and John Henry
as wizards, right?
As wizards, as real people. Yeah. I was just like, when I first started reading the book and I was into this stuff that was taking place, during the pre-Civil War, I was like, oh yeah, I'm down for this. If that's what this whole book is set during, the 1800s, the the 1840s through the 60s, I totally would read a whole volume of Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman taking on the Klan. That would be awesome. The one thing that I worry that happens when you do put in pop culture references, like are scattered throughout here, is does that stuff age? And that may be to the point, Matthew, where you're saying maybe it's not rereadable in the future. What happens when people are not aware of some of these pop culture influences? Now, I'm not saying that Sailor Moon will ever fall out of public awareness, but it might. And so I'm curious at how many people would look at this and go, I don't get it.
Yeah, and that is something that you kind of have to take into account when you're looking at any type of story. But when you're specifically looking at a story that's trying to make, a point with real world consequences, I always worry that something is, somehow demeaning. That, say, taking a character like Harriet Tubman or, a real world figure like Frederick Douglass and saying, and now they're wizards. Does that really serve what they did in real life? And that's a difficult, row to hoe, but you're also kind of trying to do as Ben Stiller said in Reality Bites, you've got these kids and you gotta feed them the meatloaf, and sometimes you have to go, oh, look, it's an airplane. But I don't know. I definitely agree with you. I wonder about some of these pop culture references, especially the ones that I didn't get. Because again,
because you're old.
I'm hip. I'm with it. Today I went to the McDonald's. I got me a Saweetie meal. I came home and I'm like, well, eat me my Saweetie meal.
Yeah, what's the special thing on that one? Because I'm not. I looked at it the other day and I was like, I don't understand what makes this special. It's just
apparently Saweetie, the rapper, co-branded with them.
Oh, this is like that. It's like that one McRib meal or whatever it was
like
a while ago. Oh, okay, yeah, okay.
Where you get like her special
sweet
and sour.
We
sauce.
diverged. Let's bring it back around.
But we're still here. We're doing that same thing. Culturally speaking, is it something that's going to last? Are you going to, in 5 years, look at this and go, what in the hell is Rick and Morty Szechuan sauce?
Yeah.
So, you do, at least I do, always wonder whether you take real world events and you put them in this fantastical setting, are you doing the real world events a disservice?
Yeah, and I think that is so I think if you're going to use pop culture references, you have to use the things that are like the biggest thing, right? You can't put in some sly reference to something that happened on page 27 of a book that only sold 200 copies and expect a lot of people to really get it, right?
You can, but it's just going to be there for the diehards.
Right. But so in order for it to work and to last, that's what I was getting to, is the lasting part. You kind of have to use the big stuff, right? You do have to use the Sailor Moons and the Harry Potters and, those kinds of things, so that when they do pop up, people are like, oh yeah, I get this. Yeah. I know something about it. So yeah, something to think about. What's the bottom line for you, Matthew, on this book, the Black
bottom
Mage?
line for me is definitely check it out. Even if you don't want to buy it, you should give it a read, and as I think somebody who is in a particular demographic that needs to read this book, if you, like me, are, an old white guy, or somebody who feels like maybe I don't necessarily understand what it's like to be a person of color, or maybe I'd like to feel like I understand more. I won't say that this is a book that's going to make you feel like you understand, but it's definitely an entertaining way to get a little closer to it, if that makes sense.
It's too bad that so many people don't allow discussions of race in their schools anymore, because this might be a great way to bring up some kind of discussion in a classroom of kids that are open-minded and willing to explore ideas and use this as a launching point into something else.
It's almost like the establishment has been infiltrated by an organization that doesn't want that to be the case.
Yeah, exactly. I wonder who they could be. I think they also have old in their name, Matthew. Here's the thing. I really enjoyed this book. At first, like Matthew, when you find out that the character's name is Token and you're like, oh, is this where this is going? And then the crow's name is Jim. I kind of also had to do a double take and reread the inside front cover and go, oh yeah, okay, I see where they're going on this. This is totally intentional and not some kind of really poor taste item.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was good. I thought it had a lot of good messages. I really enjoyed the ending. I like I said, I would love to read Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass taking on the Wizards. That would be fantastic. I really think that this is a must read book. I don't know if it's a must buy book. I'm certainly the creators would like us to say it's a must buy book. In fact, if you want to buy it, there's a Amazon affiliate link in the show notes that you can use to buy the book. And a little bit goes to them, a little bit comes to us, and I'm sure Oni Press gets to wet their beak as well. So I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. I think for some people that are like racism doesn't exist, read this and see if maybe the messaging doesn't come at you a little differently for you to see perspective and understanding. So that's my take on this. Rodrigo, what about you?
We've had there have been a lot of discussions of what critical race theory is.
Mm-hmm.
Recently, again, because there are people who don't want this sort of thing discussed because it makes them look bad on account of their huge racists and are in control of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So with critical race theory, when discussing things in an academic setting, you need to make certain assumptions, right? Like when you talk about fluid dynamics, you need to make all the previous assumptions of physics and everything else that goes into it. Nobody comes in and questions how like a specific thing works. You just kind of have to start from there, and that allows you to discuss a more complex topic, right? This comic does that. This comic just comes in with the assumption that racism is real, that the protagonist has had multiple and possibly constant contact with it, and it makes them guarded, and it makes them, it gives them like a specific attitude, and it's an attitude that you might see on other people. And this is a comic that tells you why some people have that attitude, and why sometimes when you try to help, you're actually really definitely not helping. It's again, it just the fact that it starts from there, that it spends zero time justifying that like institutional racism is a thing,
right?
That makes it valuable. So I would say if you can give it a read, definitely, at least from that perspective. At the very least, find it at your library and check it out.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. That wraps it up for this week's show. Next week, oh man, I think we're going to be dialing everything back a little bit, because next week it's Mandrake the Magician, and oh boy, these are the original newspaper comic strips. So we'll see how that plays out next week on the Major Spoilers podcast. But in the meantime, that's where we're going to wrap it up for this week. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you for being part of the Major Spoilers experience.
As always, we love your feedback. We want your feedback, so you can join the rest of the cool kids at the Major Spoilers Discord server to share your thoughts and reactions to the episode, or even better, you can drop us an email at podcast@majorspoilers.com, and you might be able to hear your words in an upcoming episode.
And don't forget, you can support this show and everything we do by becoming a patron at patreon.com/majorspoilers.
And we will be back next week, because we know that you love comics and we do too. And we will talk with you soon. Take care.
If I had the X-ray vision of a Superman, I could save a few bucks and stand around and read through the covers of the comics on the stand. But although every other page would be backwards, I suppose, I could still read the evens and the odds. Well, I don't know. Guess I haven't thought this all the way through. Plus, as soon as the comic book store guy knew, they kicked my butt out on the corner. What a major spoiler. What a major spoiler. When I think about a better way, if I was hulking green or gray, I could just bust through that brick wall, take their comic books away. But then the little meat would deal with all the tanks and bombs and guns. Have you ever tried to read a series with all that going on? Guess I need to rethink this plan. How would I back and board my comics with such huge hands? Guess I already told ya. What a major spoiler. What a major spoiler. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What a major spoiler. What a major spoiler. rich like a man of iron. I might not be surprised to find that I might actually have the heart cold to follow an entire storyline. But would I really even need to read up on all those escapades? I mean, who needs such distractions when your sister's such a babe? But the downside is such a beast. Being shot up in a fun, being the Middle East with a gang sign throwing soldier. What a major spoiler! What a major spoiler! Yeah, yeah, yeah! What a major spoiler! Whoa, 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 whoa! What a major spoiler!
This podcast is copyright 2021 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.